leads us over to chapter 14. I'm going to read to you the consequences of the bad report that was given by the spies to the children of Israel. So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?" So they said to one another, "Let us select a leader and return to Egypt." Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. But Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. And they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, "The land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." And all the congregation said to stone them with stones. Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. The unbelief of the 10 spies spread to all of the people, and they weep and they cry out because they do not want to go to Canaan. They refuse to take the land that the Lord has promised to them. This is their rebellion against God. They murmur and complain against Moses and Aaron, but ultimately they're murmuring and complaining against God. Also, in their remarks, they are blaming God for bringing them on this journey, saying it would have been better for us to die in Egypt. The Israelites would have rather been slaves and died as slaves in captivity than to walk in freedom towards the promises of God. So they are laying a heavy charge against God, against Moses, and against Aaron. They are rejecting God as their leader. They are rejecting Moses as God's spokesman. They're even rejecting Aaron. They want to appoint another person who will lead them back to bondage and slavery. As Moses and Aaron hear what the people are saying, they fall on their faces before the congregation. And they are heartbroken and devastated that the Israelites would talk like this. The Lord speaks to Moses. He doesn't speak to Israel directly. The thing is, God is still faithful, and he has that promise that he made to Abraham, and he must see it through. And so he makes an offer to Moses, saying that he will bless Moses and cause Moses to become a great and mighty nation. And he will not deal with the rest of Israel as he had intended to. Moses intercedes for the people, asking God to have mercy on them, to pardon their iniquity, to remember his covenant that he made with Abraham, and that he made with the people, and also what the other nations would say if God was to destroy the Israelites in the wilderness. Because God has been with Israel, and because of his presence, they have been able to do some amazing things. Now, if God was to destroy them, it might have been said because God was not able to fulfill his promise on bringing them into Canaan. So from verse 20, we hear God's response. Then the Lord said, "I have pardoned according to your word, but truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, because all these men who have seen my glory and the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test now these 10 times, have not heeded my voice, they certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it. Now the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwell in the valley. Tomorrow turn and move out into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea." It shows us here that Moses' prayer mattered. So God said to Moses that these people in this generation who have come out of Egypt, they have tested him these 10 times, and they will not see the land that he has promised to Abraham. Now, that's important for you to note. It is not that God is changing his promise or his covenant that he made with Abraham. The land still belongs to God's people. But this generation, this group of people will not see it. They have disqualified themselves from inhabiting the land because of their repeated rebellion against God, their disobedience, and their lack of faith in the word of God. This generation will not go in except for Caleb and Joshua because they have had a different spirit. Let's look at the judgment that God has passed on the Israelites. That starts in verse 26. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, How long shall I bear with this evil congregation who complain against me? I have heard the complaints which the children of Israel make against me. Say to them, As I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will do to you. The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in this wilderness. All of you who were numbered according to your entire number from 20 years old and above, except for Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. You shall by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. But your little ones, whom you said would be victims, I will bring in, and they shall know the land which you have despised. But as for you, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness, and your sons shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, and bear the brunt of your infidelity, until your carcasses are consumed in the wilderness. According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection. I, the Lord, have spoken this. I will surely do so to all this evil congregation who are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall be consumed, and there they shall die. Now the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land, who returned and made all the congregation complain against him by bringing a bad report of the land, those very men who brought the evil report about the land died by the plague before the Lord. But Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, remained alive, of the men who went to spy out the land. 40 often speaks of testing, and here we're going to see that the judgment that God gave to the people was a 40-year period. And after the judgment had passed, the Israelites mourned greatly. But here's what they do. The next day, they rise early in the morning and they say that they're now ready to go. Okay, so they prepare themselves to move and tell Moses now they're ready to move into the promised land. And so they are ready to go, not necessarily because they believe God now and they know that they could have taken it, but because of the judgment that is going to be passed. They don't want to wander for 40 years in the wilderness. And when Moses sees them mobilizing to go towards the promised land, Moses warns them and tells them that they should not go. They should not go because Moses, who is God's leader for the people of Israel, is not going with them. And also, the Ark of the Covenant, which represents the presence of God, is not going with them. And so Moses tells them not to go because they will go and they will find trouble. Their enemies would consume them. It's interesting how they are willing to go without the Ark, without Moses, mostly because they've rejected God and they've rejected Moses and his leadership. But they think that they can go and take the land without Moses and without God, but they believe that they couldn't take the land with Moses and with God. How many times do we think that we can accomplish something in our own strength or in our own wisdom? When God has asked for it, we cannot. We must depend on God, his timing, on his process, and how he leads us because he knows what is best. So they do try to leave without the ark and without Moses, but what happens is the same enemies that God warned Moses about, the Amalekites and the Canaanites, the children of Israel meet them and they are attacked and driven back. So exactly what Moses said would happen is what happened, and it shows you that their plan was not a plan that honored God. And we're moving over to chapter number 15. And in chapter 15, God is giving more laws to the people of Israel. And it just shows you the heart of God, because he has already said to this generation that they will not see the promised land, they will not enter it. But there is a generation that is going to enter it. The children of the generation that has rejected God. And so as God gives more laws and he gives more guidelines, it is not wasted. Now, in this chapter, there are laws of grain and drink offerings that the Israelites would have to offer to God when they arrived in Canaan. There was a command to bring the grain, the oil, and the wine with a burnt offering of a lamb as a way of giving a thanksgiving offering unto the Lord. And then when, like I said, when they came into the land, there was an offering of a ram that was supposed to also be made with a grain offering, with flour, oil, and wine. It also speaks to the stranger who was living among Israel. They were invited also to worship the God of Israel. So God wants to make sure that there's no one around them that's worshiping any pagan idols, any pagan gods, that everybody is focused on the Lord. It speaks to the heave offering as well. And then it continues in this chapter talking about laws concerning unintentional sin and presumptuous sin. So you're planning to sin. From verse 22, if you sin unintentionally and do not observe all these commandments which the Lord has spoken to Moses, all that the Lord has commanded you by the hand of Moses from the day the Lord gave commandment and onward throughout your generations, then it will be, if it is unintentionally committed, without the knowledge of the congregation, that the whole congregation shall offer one young bull as a burnt offering, as a sweet aroma to the Lord, with its grain offering and its drink offering, according to the ordinance, and one kid of the goats as a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement for the whole congregation of the children of Israel, and it shall be forgiven them, for it was unintentional. They shall bring their offering, an offering made by fire to the Lord, and their sin offering before the Lord for their unintended sin. It shall be forgiven the whole congregation of the children of Israel and the stranger who dwells among them, because all the people did it unintentionally. And unintentional sins still required a blood atonement. God is outlining to Moses the sacrifice that needs to be given. It is important to note that God says there should be one law for him who sins unintentionally, whether they're native born, they're from the lineage of Jacob, or a stranger dwelling among them. One law, right, for everybody. And then it goes to intentional sinning. If something is done intentionally, that the person should be completely cut off and his guilt be upon him. Carries on to the penalty for violating the Sabbath. Remember, God said that on the Sabbath day they should rest and not do any work on it. It's a sign of their dependence on God and just acknowledging that God is their source. And so it shows that a man was caught gathering sticks. So he was working on the Sabbath, and those who found him brought him to Moses and to Aaron to know what to do with him. The Lord gives the command that he is to be put to death by the hand of the people. And what happens is they take him outside the camp and stone him. So this is an execution of a presumptuous sinner. He knew what he was doing. He knew it was wrong, and he still chose to do it. And with such a grievous punishment, it's a reminder to the people not to do it. The chapter closes off with a description of tassels on garments. So I'm going to read from verse 37. Again, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a blue thread in the tassels of the corners. You shall have the tassel, that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them, and that they may not follow the harlotry to which your own heart and your own eyes are inclined, and that you may remember and do all my commandments and be holy for your God. I am the Lord, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord, your God." So these tassels were added to the garments of the Israelites as a reminder of their identity and their responsibility to obey God in all things. And even now, the Jewish people wear these tassels on garments underneath their clothing as a reminder of who they are and what God has said. And there's something really interesting in verse 39. It says that you may not follow the harlotry to which your own heart and your own eyes are inclined. So he lets them know that they will need a reminder to live holy, because their hearts, what they feel, what they're thinking on, what they're meditating on, their eyes, what they see, are inclined towards harlotry or idolatry. So in order to live holy, to be holy, they'll need this reminder. When they see it, they'll know they cannot behave in a certain way. And that brings us to chapter 16. Chapter 16 marks an event that I believe is a build-up of murmuring and complaining and doubting God's leadership and doubting Moses' leadership. So let me read to you from verse 1. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. They gathered together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" So there is a company of people led by Korah. Now, Korah is part of the Levitical tribe. If you remember back to my diagram that I showed you in the last video, the tabernacle of meeting was the center of the community. Then in the next ring were all the priests with Moses and Aaron's tents at the beginning of the tabernacle, and on the outer ring were the entire community. Korah dwelt in the tribe of Kohath. This was a tribe that was close to the tabernacle because they are Levites. So Korah is a Levite. And remember, the Levites are God's firstborn. They are consecrated to his service, but not all the Levites are priests. Only Aaron and Aaron's family are priests. Korah and some of the people from Reuben's tribe, who were closer in proximity, they went to Moses and they said to Moses, "He takes too much upon himself. Everybody is holy. Why would Moses exalt himself above the assembly?" In inciting this rebellion, there are also 250 well-known men who stand with them. So when Moses hears this, Moses is disheartened. And what's really happening is there's a Levite who wants to be a priest, even though that's not what God has asked for. The Kohathites and Moses's camp, they're all from Levi. So this is family members who are turning on each other. The Kohathites had such a prestigious role in their service of the kingdom. Remember, they were responsible for carrying the most holy things of the tabernacle. Korah is accusing Moses of pride and also loving power, loving authority, and wielding that over the people. And he was a man of influence because 250 people, 250 leaders were following him already. Now, it is not the elders. Remember, God had just anointed the 70 elders. It's not the elders who are with Korah. It is other leaders who were in the camp. Moses prays for them. As he gets a sense of God's direction of what to do, he issues a challenge to Korah. And the essence of the challenges is that every one of the men, the 250, would take a censer and put incense in it and then bring the censer before the Lord. And then the Lord will determine which fire he will accept. They wanted to be priests. They wanted to be able to serve in the tabernacle. Moses allows them to come to the door of the tabernacle, bring the incense, bring the censers, and let's see how God will judge. And as they arrive there, in front of the tabernacle, the glory of the Lord appears to all the congregation. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." Then they fell on their faces and said, "O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and you be angry with all the congregation?" So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the congregation, saying, Get away from the tents of Korah and Dathan and Abiram." And Moses said, "By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. If these men die naturally like all men, or if they are visited by the common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord." Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, that the ground split apart under them, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households, and all the men with Korah, with all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. Then all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up also." And a fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. So the Lord let Moses know what was going to happen. And so in issuing this challenge, he knew what the Lord would do for those who had rejected God. And God's fire consumed the 250 people that were offering incense in their censers. God also instructs Moses and Aaron to take the censers that were used by the 250 people who wanted to be priests and to beat them flat and use them to cover the main altar of sacrifice. So this was a reminder of what had happened and also a warning to others not to try to rebel against God and God's order of leadership. On the next day, the congregation turns against Moses and says to Moses and Aaron that they have killed the people of the Lord. They didn't see that it is God who passed judgment. They have taken it that Moses has done it. As they're complaining, once again, Moses, of course, interceding for these people. And Aaron had to very quickly take a censer with fire from the altar. So this was the prescribed way that the Lord had given to him, and go and make atonement for them, because a plague was spreading among them and many people were dying very, very quickly. So Aaron runs, he takes the incense from the altar, and wherever he goes, that's where the plague stops. As he intercedes for the people, God's mercy is displayed. That day, over 14,000 people died. The rebellion with Korah did not end well for the people. And God had to show in a very strong manner what happens when they rebel against him.